Hi everyone, it's Mary from Lulu's Time and Essentials, and welcome to Vitamins, Minerals, and Herbs. This is part one, metabolism. When Lulu was looking to open her store and was showing me a little bit about herbs, essentials, I thought I knew a little bit, and I realized that there was a lot I didn't know. I didn't know a lot about these herbs, and I tried to really educate myself. And what I ended up doing is through hours and hours of looking at these different herbs, I realized a couple of different things. They really were vitamins, minerals that really work to make us the best us that we can be. And that's where I got really interested in, okay, well, how do I use herbs? Because it can get really confusing. So what I did is realize that they're vitamins and minerals. They're plant-based, some, with bark and seeds, but really they provide us with vitamins and minerals. And through that is really how we can, help try to restore some things. And then that pretty much led me to realize that metabolism is a huge part of it and really what happens. And I'll be the first to admit I learned a lot about metabolism when I was in nursing school, and it was pretty amazing how much I forgot. So I hope this helps everyone, and I will try to keep it as really down to earth and simple as possible. And enjoy.
If you're interested in learning about herbs, it can get very confusing. The most important thing to realize is that herbs are vitamins and minerals, and we need vitamins and minerals for our metabolism. So, starting with metabolism is probably the best way to get an understanding of how you may want to use herbs. What's important to know is we are organisms. We are made up of cells, and cells and metabolism go hand in hand. To be considered a life form or a living organism, we need certain characteristics. One would be our being able to respond to our environment, our being able to reproduce, to adapt, to grow, and to develop. The other few things are energy production, which is metabolism at a cell level, homeostasis, and evolution. So, what do our cells do? Well, they actually have very specific functions, giving our bodies structure and support, helping our bodies continuously grow and regrow, and moving and producing energy inside and outside of our cells, reproducing by metabolic reactions. This energy is called adenosine triphosphate, or ATP, and often it works with oxygen. It can without. Notice the word phosphate. It is a mineral. ATP is the energy that our body uses for things like nerve impulses, muscle contractions. It's what we need to stay alive at a cellular level. Just like we breathe air in and out, our cells actually breathe. And it is done through a process called cellular respiration. In this process, energy is converted from the foods basically that we eat, the carbohydrates, fats, and proteins, into this ATP, or adenosine triphosphate. And it's how we make energy. It's done with or without oxygen. Aerobic respiration, which is done with oxygen, yields the highest amount of ATP, or energy, but it can be done both ways. What is metabolism? It's a chemical reaction organisms need to make energy. The reason that we need energy is to respond to our environment, reproduce, adapt, grow, develop, produce energy, and homeostasis and evolution. We do this by eating food, having it broken down into proteins, carbohydrates, and fats, and then it's further broken down into nutrients at a cellular level. With metabolism, there are a couple of chemical reactions that are happening. You have something called catabolism, which large molecules are being broken down into small molecules and a little bit of energy is being produced. That typically is done without oxygen. And then you have anabolism, where small molecules are used to make large molecules, and energy is used in that process. So sometimes catabolism makes energy for anabolism to happen. What some examples would be are growing tissues, repairing cell damage, protein synthesis, which is really just making proteins, weightlifting, making muscles. In metabolism, we eat food, it goes into our digestive system. You have acids and enzymes that break down the food into micronutrients, which would be vitamins and minerals. With carbohydrates, they break down into glucose, triglycerides break down into fatty acids, proteins break down into amino acids. Then they all get broken down some more and go through a cycle. And then the electrons are transported in and out of the cells. So let's take a look at that. So when I start thinking about the process of energy, ATP, and how it's done, I personally like a very simple three-step process. There are a lot more steps and it's very complex. All I need to know is really certain things. In glycolysis, what happens? Well, it's called the catabolism of carbohydrates, meaning bigger molecules are broken down into smaller molecules through a series of chemical reactions. The purpose is still to get energy. Fats and proteins are also broken down to make energy as well. It's a long process. In the end, they're broken down by either aerobic or anaerobic respiration, meaning they're broken down either with oxygen or without oxygen. The Krebs cycle, very, very complex, I will break down for you. It is one of the cycles of metabolism, also called citric acid or tricarboxylic acid. You don't have to remember those names. What do you need to know? It's the first process of aerobic cell respiration, meaning this is where oxygen comes in. So once the glucose is broken down, it can move energy to different parts of your cells. So next what happens, the carbohydrates, fats, and proteins are broken down into those carbon dioxide chains and turns water into energy. We can store some of this energy. Typically, we know it as fat, but it can be stored. And then what would happen is you could have catabolism, meaning that glucose, that form of glucose, would be broken down, often without oxygen. Kind of like a little highway coming and going of energy. The next stage is something called oxidation of acetate. During this process, carbon is turned into carbon dioxide. The electron transportation chain is extremely complex. Let me break it down into some very easy to understand ideas. In the process, it uses enzymes, proteins. They work as catalysts, which means they can speed up a chemical reaction. In this chemical reaction, what's happening is electricity is moving. Electrons, which are negative charged particles, and through the chemical reaction, they're moving within your cells. It's important to know because it's how cells will live and breathe. It's how energy is made to carry out those original functions. And you get that by taking in vitamins and minerals, which can be through food, herbs. All this means is how we break down food to get energy for our cells. It is done through an extremely complex biochemical process, meaning a biological chemicals that we have in our bodies. So I have the diagram here if you want to look through it. Sometimes when you're researching things, you may hear it's a cofactor or a coenzyme. So I've included the definitions, what they are. They're pretty much used in these chemical reactions and how they work. So they're parts of the chemical reactions. Some of them are catalysts. Some of them are needed to bind, often with a protein. And again, it's for making energy. Just to review, this process is going on in every cell. It's going on in our body. We are filled with similar cells that become tissues, similar tissues that become organs, a group of organs that become a system, and a group of systems that makes us up. The other piece I included is what a free radical was. A lot of us, especially if you've seen commercials about skincare, have heard of these free radicals. Well, what happens is oxygen splits into a single atom through some processes, and you have something called an unpaired electron, which is why I talked about electrons, and also oxidation. Antioxidants will pair with these unpaired electrons so they don't go through the process of trying to damage your cell's DNA and protein. And herbs and vitamins and minerals can help our bodies get what we need as well as fresh food.